So hello and welcome to this episode of In Conversation. We are towards the end of September 2025 and just on the cusp of starting a brand new admission cycle. Joined today by Katherine. Hi Katherine, how you doing?
I'm really well, thank you, Karl.
Fantastic. Katherine, we're going to talk a little bit about and reflect on Results Day, which seems like a long time ago now, but it's probably just about a month and a bit away that it happened. And obviously for some universities and us in particular, our Freshers Week was last week, so we've already had the intake already start and enjoying the campus, enjoying the facilities. Let's go back and let's talk about results in relation to, there was a lot of hype anxiety on what could or couldn't happen with results coming through. What did happen, Katherine, in terms of students and their attainment levels and achievement?
Well, for Exeter, it was a really fabulous results period, Karl. We'd gone into the results period with a very healthy, firm offer holder pool, and we did find that perhaps the really top grades, A star and an A, were down a little bit nationally. But that didn't really affect us in terms of being able to confirm the places that we want to. And in terms of attainment, although this year's cohort is very much larger than it was last year or the year before, actually our average attainment has gone up compared to last year. So altogether, it's been a really positive admissions round for Exeter. And we have, as you say, a lovely group of new students who have started with us and very much enjoying life in this very beautiful city, and keeping the shops and everybody else very busy, I think.
I thought it was a good sign, isn't it? And Katherine, thinking about subject trends, are there any particular reflections that we can make on subject routes that students or perhaps we saw different levels of competition that we couldn't envisage?
Well, some things worked out very much as we expected them to from the trends that we'd seen earlier in the cycle. And I guess we've talked before in conversation about the increasing interest in quite heavily vocationally oriented subjects, perhaps like engineering or law would be two really good examples. And students are certainly voting for those with their feet very actively at the moment. But I guess the slight surprises this year during the results phase itself were with psychology. We've recruited an incredibly healthy cohort for psychology, and we had a larger target for that discipline. But it was perhaps a little bit harder to get there than we had anticipated it might be. And computer science, which still remains a puzzle to me, given everything we've said about vocational provision, given the prominence in the news of everything to do with artificial intelligence and data science. But computer science nationally and at Exeter seems to be a discipline where it's getting that little bit harder to fill the target. I mean, it wasn't a struggle for us, but that would be an area currently where, you know, by intuition and evidence, you would think we would be really oversubscribed. And I don't know whether that's because, obviously, with maths A level being the single biggest A level in terms of take up, lots more students are maybe deciding to do maths and keep their options open. I don't know what the reason is, but I would have expected computer science possibly to be that little bit more popular nationally at the minute.
And of course, that's an interesting one because computer science saw a rise, particularly over COVID and afterwards, of interest and people wanting to go into that profession. And all of a sudden, it's almost like if the brakes have been applied and we've seen less students wanting to go into sort of studying computer science. So there seems to be a trend there, a change in possibly students going elsewhere.
Well, it feels a little bit to me like what happened to accounting a little while ago, where there was lots of noise out there in the applicant community and perhaps even the employer community around, maybe were accountancy jobs going to be replaced by artificial intelligence? People would be better off doing a different kind of business or finance discipline. But actually, accounting is in massively good heart at Exeter again, and people seem to have got over that and realized that the discipline is actually quite broadly based in terms of a business training and can take you off in all sorts of really exciting directions in terms of finance. And I wonder whether something similar is going on with computing, where people think we're all, moving into a sort of a post-coding type environment. And maybe the young people are sort of feeling or sensing that, and therefore going for other kind of maths or science related options that keep their future career paths really open. But I expect this pendulum will swing back. In my long experience of doing admissions, these things all go in waves, and we'll be back seeing computer science very much at the top of that crest very soon.
And just going back to your comments about psychology, and you mentioned that we increased our target. What that means is that we had additional places available,
yes,
for students this year, but yet it wasn't as easy. I guess what you were alluding to was it wasn't a sort of flooding of students wanted to do psychology. There seems to be a stabilizing, perhaps, of the interest there.
yeah.
Is that what's happening in that subject?
Psychology is always super popular as far as I can tell. There is a sort of steadiness there, but I think it is a discipline that many other Russell Group institutions have also tried to grow and expand to meet that demand. And so possibly across the whole of the Russell Group, maybe there have been more places available over the last year or two. And I guess many of us, Exeter included, will have a science requirement at A level to study psychology. And so there is a kind of natural break from that subject requirement on the pool of people that can come and study the discipline. So it's not an endless supply, if you like, of students who are qualified to study psychology. So I think maybe that's what's going on there.
Okay. What about healthcare? In terms of, and obviously healthcare can be broken down into lots of different sort of sub areas, and I'm deliberately choosing an overarching theme rather than focusing on any particular course at this stage. But in terms of healthcare, have we seen any changes in patterns of application volume and numbers coming through?
Well, the standout surprise, not surprise, because we've been seeing the trend all through the admission cycle, but medical imaging, otherwise known also as radiography, has just had the most fabulous year. And I think, again, from discussions with colleagues in other admissions offices, this does seem to be a little bit of a pattern. It's really wonderful news for all of us, because the NHS really is very keen to see increased numbers of radiographers coming through. But if we were to go back, 3-4 years or more, we would find that medical imaging would be a relatively hard sell compared to something, perhaps like medicine itself or psychology. And so it's really wonderful to see young people coming forward in such strong numbers to pursue a career in that area, because they're going to have a very bright future within the NHS and some really strong employment opportunities. So that is really great. And also, we've had a really good year for nursing. Again, this is an area we've been watching, because nationally, the number of older learners coming forward for nursing has been falling somewhat. And the pool of 18-year-olds wanting to do nursing perhaps has been steadier nationally. And so Exeter was always wondering whether perhaps, we would be able to fill all of those places quite as well as we have. But we've had a really great year for nursing, and really pleased to see us going from strength to strength in our Academy of Nursing. Medicine's had a great year too, but kind of almost when doesn't it? But we had, as you'll remember, Karl, we had introduced that A-star requirement to our admissions requirements for medicine, and we'd wondered whether that perhaps would make it a little bit more challenging for us to fill our places. But I'm very pleased to say that we were more or less exactly bang on our target number for medicine. We landed it beautifully. The proverbial jumbo jet landed on the pinhead for medicine, which was fabulous.
Excellent. Katherine, you mentioned at the start about cohort size, and you said that we had increased our numbers a little bit. Now, this seems to be quite a common story across many universities across the UK. And there are some obvious questions that arise from that, but we'll explore in a second. But the first bit is, why are we increasing our student numbers? So for the benefit of those who are listening to us today, what are the reasons for us wishes to increase those numbers within our institution?
Yes, well, so I mean, home undergraduate education is the core of the University of Exeter. You know, we're a superb provider of a really excellent undergraduate education. We're one of the largest recruiters of undergraduate students in any year, but you know, in this year probably in particular, anywhere in the UK, and we want to carry on doing well what we already do brilliantly well. Of course, the capacity to grow those cohorts reflects the rather more challenging circumstances around international recruitment at the moment. We're seeing some really big changes in demand, not just Exeter, but you know, all universities in the UK are seeing big shifts in demand from students coming, for example, from China, but some of our other big international markets also. More for postgraduate education, I think it's fair to say, than for undergrad. And so it's becoming harder to recruit those postgraduate international students. And so we're making that capacity available on the undergraduate side, because the capacity is there. We've got the teaching staff ready and waiting, and we've managed to make the accommodation situation work, because obviously we've switched some rooms from those postgraduate students to the undergraduate. And all of that makes a lot of sense for us in terms of being able to sustain the teaching excellence and the research excellence that we're really well known for.
Katherine, I want to pause 2 seconds just to remind those who are joining us today that if you want to post any questions live, we are live at the moment, so you can just use the chat function on the webinar, and I'll be able to pick them up as we go through. Staying on that theme, Katherine, you mentioned about, we've spoken about the cohort size and actually what that means for those who are joining us today in terms of their students is there's greater opportunities for them to be able to engage with a Russell Group university like ours, or similar, where other institutions are doing sort of similar sort of things. Now, one of the interesting stuff you said at the start was that in terms of attainment levels, that hasn't affected the entry levels of students coming in. Now, what you expect would be, look, if we increase the numbers of students we have, that actually perhaps that could, as a reflection on that could be, and an implication of that could be that the grade students coming in are coming down as a result, and that's not the case here.
It isn't the case here, and I think one of the things that's behind that for us, Karl, is that Exeter actually for years has had one of the broadest and deepest contextual admissions policies of any of the universities in the Russell Group. We have for some years been really, really flexible in the offers that we make and the grades at which we make them. You know, our contextual offers typically can be 2 grades below the standard entry requirement, but for those people that work closely with us on you know, attainment raising programs closely linked to the University of Exeter, it can be 3 grades. And we have more students than ever in that contextual offer pool. But that's been a feature of our admissions for some time. And so perhaps in a context where, you know, I'm speculating that maybe some other Russell groups have brought their entry requirements down quite suddenly for part of their admissions this year, that's been that flexibility and that steadiness has kind of been baked into the way that we do it for a little while. I think it's also fair to say, though, Karl, that we have many disciplines like medicine, for example, or law or economics, where we always have a really able cohort, and we're still seeing many students for disciplines like that coming in with 3A stars. We have some exceptionally able and well qualified students, and that's really wonderful to see. But this along with being one of our largest cohorts for a little while, this will also be one of our most diverse cohorts for a little while, and I think that's a really superb achievement.
Let's look ahead. So we're now, the UCAS cycle is now open and students have submitted applications. I know that we've already got a few, sort of 100 already come through. In this early on, we're still not even sort of halfway through the cycle. What can we expect for 2026? So is it going to be a repeat button of what we saw in 2025? Are we going to see exactly the same patterns of behaviour from institutions? Both, you mentioned we had increased our cohort. Does that mean that we envisage staying the same as what we are at the moment? Is there flexibility there? What are the opportunities for students?
Some of that is still to be decided, because we haven't quite finished enrolling all of the new students we've got and analysing all of our data and patterns from the last admission cycle. So we will be taking stock over the next few weeks and deciding exactly what our targets for the next cycle are. But I can safely say that we will continue to prioritise diversity, that we will continue to very much want and welcome applications from students who are from less advantaged backgrounds, from students within the state sector, particularly the non-selective state sector. And we are really making progress in our goal to be as diverse as we can in those regards. So all of that, I think, will be a constant. No admission cycle is ever the same. That's the joy of doing this. There's always some surprise. I think the little hidden surprise, Karl, for this year is that we've been looking at our data going into the 2026 cycle, realizing that we have an extremely healthy pool of people with deferred places. So a very high number of people have had deferred entry offers from the 2025 cycle to the 2026 cycle. And of course, those numbers are already in our bank, and they, in a sense, put a little bit of a brake on the number of offers we can make for the coming cycle. So we will be having to do some analysis, discipline by discipline, to see whether we actually need to be a little bit cautious in some instances, because we have really quite a significantly higher number of deferred entry folks than we would have done last year. So there could be a small change in tactics resulting from that. But my guess would be that won't change our offer making tactics too much. We will simply regard it as a little bit of an insurance policy against having to do very much clearing activity later in the cycle. So that would be my guess. But until I actually see the admissions intake targets from our planning team, I won't be able to tell for certain. So I would think it would be a very similar cycle to last year in terms of opportunity for schools and colleges.
And I appreciate this probably is pure speculation, but do we have any reasons why that group of deferred students has increased from last year? Do we think perhaps it could be to do with financial support, and there are a great number of students who may be seeking employment, trying to generate income? Is it taking a gap and going, right, I need to take a break from education and then start again?
Indeed, pure speculation, but I think there are a number of things going on here. The most obvious factor is that we had a larger pool of firm offer holders this year than last year. So naturally, that volume was higher, but that doesn't explain it entirely. I don't know about you, but when I'm out and about in schools and colleges, I'm certainly picking up from the young people themselves sometimes a nervousness about carrying a university application alongside the intensity of 3 or 4 A levels or IB or BTEC, and an interest perhaps in making that application the following year. Of course, that doesn't explain those that are already in our pool from 2025, because they did apply last year alongside their studies, but they decided to take the gap year. And those, I think, sometimes are wanting partly to take a break from the intensity of that study, but also to earn some money. And I do think those cost of living pressures are a factor. And we know that for many families, in particular, the cost of accommodation, more or less any of the university choices they might be wanting to make, means that a little bit of a financial cushion can be a really, really good thing. So I think it's a number of different factors.
And Katherine, you said no admission cycle is ever the same. We're also changing the way that we utilize the EPQ for next year. We're changing that a little bit as well.
We are, and I'm really pleased to be able to say that we will be continuing to make alternative offers for those that have an EPQ or a core maths qualification, but we will be reducing that requirement down from an A to a B. So this is in recognition. It's a particular passion of mine, really, to encourage the extended project qualification or indeed an additional maths qualification. But I'm a particular advocate of the EPQ because it really does give the best possible indication of what studying at university level is going to be like. The need to undertake a project on an extended time frame, sometimes to do a long piece of research which is also written up and referenced, which has to be defended through a presentation session. These are the kind of skills that the student is going to be deploying all the time on an undergraduate degree. And I personally think that, having had two daughters, both of whom did EPQs, I would like to say voluntarily, there was some encouragement, but in both instances, it made a material difference to them in terms of their offers. And it had an enormous benefit in terms of getting them to understand what they would be taking on. But I also know how much work it is and how much effort schools and colleges put into supporting them. And that's why we are being groundbreaking in the sector in reducing that EPQ alternative requirement down to a grade B from a grade A. So that means that alternative offer, so for example, if your A-level requirements are AAA, your alternative offer would be AAA from 3 A-levels or AAB to include a grade B in your EPQ or core maths qualification.
So it's one grade drop as a result of achieving that grade B, yes, EPQ or core maths.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And I'm sure your daughters did have a choice, and they made a wise choice. Otherwise, they wouldn't be fit. No, that wasn't the case. Katherine, that's brilliant. I think I can see we've got some people with us joining us today. If you do have any questions, please do post them in the chat. But I think we've covered quite a lot of the reflective piece that I want to cover for today. We've looked at the results day, and we've also looked at what could happen in the forthcoming cycle. A massive thank you to all of you who've joined us today, and also those of you who'll be listening to us on catch up. Katherine, thank you for your insight. Thank you for providing us with that information for today. We'll be back, and we've got further sessions scheduled for October, November. So we will be back and we will share the format through our social media platforms and on our teachers' website. Please do engage with us. Go to our social media platforms. You can see the address on the screen at the moment. And you can also go to our teachers' website, where there's a whole plethora of different resources and materials you can download to support your students make that informed decision about their next steps. So please do engage with all those resources or reach out to us through our website. For now, a massive thank you for joining us, and we'll catch up with you again next time. Thank you.